What are characters? Well, it sounds like a silly question until you try to actually define what they are. Then it becomes a little more complicated. I'll give you the quick answer to that. Characters have two jobs that they have to do to be characters. One of them, they have to be real people so we can identify with them, even if it's a shark or a tree or a robot that's the character. It has to have human attributes that we can identify with, either as ourselves, to stand in their shoes, or as other people we see in everyday life, from the nasty person who's always angry to the kind-hearted person who's always giving, or somebody who's crushed by life, or somebody who's got a dream. All those personality types, the things that make us human, have to be imbued into this fictional construct for it to be a character. Again, whatever it is, a rock, a stone, the wind, the sea, or mostly people. Now, the second thing that a character has to have to be a character is it needs to play a role in the story at large, the overarching plot that is leading towards the goal or an individual character's achievement and their requirements along the way and arcs of character growth. They have to participate in that. They have to move that forward from where the story's inception is to where its conclusion is. And if they don't do that, if they don't have a role in it, they can still appear in a story or a movie, but they appear just as what we call a player, sort of window dressing. They can just show up, be interesting, but not really move anything along or change anybody's mind or attitude. And it enlivens the story, because movies are filled with extras, and so are books. You have to have interesting people running in and out, even though they don't affect the course of the story. Not everything is plot-driven. Not everything is narrative-driven. So you can have them in, but they're players, not characters, because they don't have any function in the structure of the story to move it forward. Now, if they do have a function to move the story forward, then you assign that function to some player, some individual has interesting personality traits. You're beginning to get the idea here. Moving the story forward is a structural function, which is where you find your archetypes or your character types that maybe Joseph Campbell would talk about, or we would talk about in our Dramatica theory as being the antagonist, the protagonist, the reason, the emotion character, the skeptic and the believer. All of these different archetypes that you find structurally, they don't feel like people, they function like people. And who are these people that they're functioning like? You and me. Because within us, we all have those traits: skepticism and reason and emotion and confidence and doubt and all of the different attributes that we use in dealing with our own personal issues. But when we come together towards a common purpose, like the story at large, the overarching story arc, on either side of it, forward or against it, it's an area of common concern, then we all end up becoming like the voice of reason for this effort, or the resident skeptic. You see, in real life, people gather together in groups and they self-organize automatically so that it becomes kind of a larger fractal version of ourselves, a bigger psychology in which we are part. We feel part of something larger than ourselves because we will all adopt a role in that larger interest that we're sharing. Again, the protagonist and the antagonist are just our drive to get things changed and our desire to maybe hold back and not let them happen. Reticence, okay, that's a protagonist and antagonist at that larger level. It doesn't have any character associated with it in terms of personality. It has a functional character associated with it. So going back to the original question, what are characters? Well, they have two jobs, in summary. One of them, we have to be able to relate to them as real people, even if they're not people, robots and trees and wind and things. And secondly, they have to have a function, a role in advancing the story forward as it's explored what is the best way to solve this kind of issue. Now, if you do both of those things, you got a character, and if they only just show up and provide exposition like, General, I just heard that the enemy's over the hill. Well, they don't really advance the plot forward. They're just an expository trick. They're players. If they just come in and go, la-di-da, okay, they may be really interesting and steal the show, but they're really not characters because they don't also fulfill that role to move the story forward towards its conclusion.